Guys, I got the latest data coming in from Hoover Dam and Lake Mead, and we're about to break the record lows, guys. As I started the video, we were a little less than 10 inches away from that low-level mark that was set in July of 2022. Wouldn't you remember that? We were watching some of the same events happen at that time. But the record low, again, has been stated at 1040, but it was actually 1040.58, a little over 1040 and a half feet. And it makes a difference when you're looking at the drop here, because right now, as of today, we are at 1041.25. It was 0.28 when I started the video. So we're about, again, getting close to less than 9 inches away from the record. But again, 1040.58 was that record. We're going to look at that and at the current information coming in and the current level. And this is what we had back then, again, July 28, 2022, just 3 days from being 4 years. But Lake Mead's all-time lowest recorded water level was 1040.58 feet above sea level, set again on the July 28. It marked the lowest point for the reservoir since it was initially filled in the 1930s following the construction of Hoover Dam. Now, this morning at the 8 to 9 o'clock hour, and this would be mountain time, we were at 1041.26. That's the newest numbers. Remember, record low was 1040.58. So that puts us again, guys, we're about 3/4 of a foot from breaking, sinking below that record low. Again, when I started getting the data ready, we were at 1041.28. We're at 26 now, or 0.26. So we are almost, again, at 3/4 of a foot away from breaking that record. Now, every fraction of a foot is vital now due to critical infrastructure thresholds. The 1040-foot buffer. At this exact level, the upper water intake valves for the municipal supply become heavily restricted, complicating water delivery to the Las Vegas Valley. And the Bureau of Reclamation, guys, now they're expecting this less than a foot gap to be completely erased in a matter of days. Now, we've had a little bit of reprieve there because we were averaging 2.1 feet in drop for every 14 days, and that's been going on since late May. But this, a little bit of rain just maybe a week ago upstream from Mead has slowed that progression down to about 1.5 or 1.6 feet per 14 days. But now that's pretty much gone, and we're going to actually see it go back up to about 0.23 foot per day like it has the last 2 days. But even at the rate we're seeing right now, which is, again, getting very quickly back up to the 2.1 feet per 2 weeks, guys, in just less than 1 week, we're going to hit the 1040 mark. 3 or 4 days. Think about that. But 1038 is where Tier 3 restrictions kick in, and the federal government's going to have to step in and tell which of the big areas get the water. California's #1 on the list before the feds step in, so we're going to have to see how that plays out. But, guys, that 1038-foot mark is less than 3 weeks now. We talked about 4 weeks in a video a little over a week ago, but we did, again, get a little bit of reprieve from the upstream rain, and it didn't raise the lake, it just kind of slowed down the drop. And again, while the recent American summer monsoon rains provided a temporary breather, the reservoir's buffer remains razor thin, and this recent slump dropping to 1.57 feet across the last 14 days, it shows that its system is still aggressively discharging far more water downstream than it's receiving from the dried up Colorado River Basin. Again, distance to 1038, and we're standing at 1041, now 0.26. The reservoir is only 3.26 feet away from 1038. Guys, at 2 foot average, again, 3 weeks before major cutbacks, hydropower and downstream water. And again, they say 1035 is where they got to shut down all but the 4 remaining low-head turbines. There was 5, but with 4, it's really going to put it to where it's about an 80% cut of hydropower, which, as I've said before, is going to overload the already stressed grid that they're going to have to switch the hydropower to. In other words, Salt River Project, the other people, they're loaded down, and they're fixing to have to own a massive load, and it's going to create some power outages. So in about 3 weeks, we're going to be in Tier 3 shortage thresholds. Hitting the 1038 threatens to trigger an unprecedented Tier 3 wattage shortage declaration. You'll have mandatory Southwest cuts. A drop this low would legally force the federal government to mandate severe historic water supply cuts to Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico. This would bypass ongoing state negotiations and directly pinch municipal and agricultural allocations from the Southwest. It's going to be some legal battles. They're already lawyering up for it, especially California, because right now they have senior water rights. But that may be taken away from them. We'll see how it balances. The entire system is collapsing, so we're kind of looking at the gasping last breaths of it, but this is how it's going to play out. And we're quickly, again, losing that rain buffer that we got. It was a temporary reprieve, but guys, in the last 48 hours, we've lost 0.26 feet. And that gets us where we're at now. Now, think about that. So 4 days, you're over a foot. But the data reveals exactly why the lake has resumed its rapid decline. Every single day for the last 14 days, the outflow has vastly exceeded the inflow. On Friday, yesterday, July 24th, the lake only received 10,646 cubic feet per second of inflow, but discharged almost 3,000 more cubic feet per second at 1352. It's a continuous bleed. Over the 14 days, that structural deficit drained 109,156 acre-feet of storage, dropping content of the lake from 7.17 million down to 0.06 million acre-feet. Guys, that's a big drop. Think about that, and it's going to continue to drop at a quicker rate because the canyon gets narrower as it goes down, so there's less water volume. And guys, when we drop from that 1038 in a few weeks, getting it down to 1035 in about 5 or 6 weeks, guys, then things are going to change. They're going to have to cut off the 12 top turbines, and that will only leave them 4. But because of this loss of water height and the problems with air getting in, they'll have turbine damage. We talked about it. It says operating the older traditional turbines under such a low head force, it forces water to shift into vapor state and implode. The supercharged micro bubbles cause explosive physical erosion, again cavitation, which can rapidly tear apart the concrete and steel components of the machinery. And so it's going to have to be a mandatory shutdown. You're going to lose 80% of the hydropower in less than 6 weeks. Now, that's going to put us at the end of August or the first week in September, but it presents the worst-case scenario for the Southwest grid. This timeline forces the shutdown of the 12 traditional turbines right at the tail end of a peak summer heat wave, precisely when electricity demand in Southern California, Arizona, and Nevada are at its highest. Now, again, looking at 1038, we're just over 3 feet away from that. But that's the legal limit that forces the federal government to step in. They could also start to see some cavitation problems, like they're going to definitely find at 1035. But 1038, again, is the signal for the feds to take over. And under the 2019 Drought Contingency Plan, called the DCP, a Tier 3 declaration forces Arizona to lose 720,000 of acre-feet of its water supply, nearly 26% of its total Colorado River allocation. Nevada loses 10% of its allocation. Now, most importantly, dropping below 1038 feet is the threshold where California is legally forced to take its first major mandatory water cut. And that's less than half of what Arizona is going to take as far as the cut. In California will be at 350,000 acre-feet. Until this point, California holds senior water rights and is largely shielded from cuts. They've got just a little bit of time left, guys, about 3 weeks before the feds step in. Now, what I'm seeing here when they're talking about allocating 720,000 acre feet or 350,000. The river's drying up, and paper money is no longer going to work. So we'll see these cuts, but as the river drops, how will that change it all? That's going to be the picture that will unfold. And what they'll do, they'll introduce what's called a secretarial order, and it allows the federal government to look at the Colorado River as a single synchronized machine rather than separate state territories. In other words, they'll look at total acre feet of all of the lakes combined, the reservoirs, including Flaming Gorge. And they've been planning on really draining Flaming Gorge, guys, but if you look at the intakes and outtakes of Flaming Gorge today, they don't have a lot more to put out as far as increase. Again, to protect Lake Mead and Lake Powell from crashing into cavitation or dead pool status, the Secretary can order the emergency release of hundreds of thousands of acre feet of water from smaller upstream federal reservoirs such as Flaming Gorge. Now, this is in their plans, which is in Wyoming and Utah. We talked about that in Tony Valdez and his family up there, but they want to artificially buoy the larger lakes, but I think the damage has been done. I think Tony Valdez and the people at Buckboard Marina have already gotten below the point to where they can use municipal water. Now, let's look at Flaming Gorge just a minute and up at Buckboard Marina. I mentioned that, again, Tony Valdez and crew may have lost their municipal water supply, and this is what I found out. Again, the marina relies on a custom floating pump on the surface of the reservoir to supply its entire municipal drinking water system, the store and the restaurant. This specialized pump physically stops functioning once the water slips past 6,015 feet. And today, guys, Flaming Gorge is at 6,013.21 feet, and that's 1.79 feet below the critical infrastructure intake floor. Now, because the Bureau, back a few months ago, they forced emergency water releases coming out of Flaming Gorge, it happened so quick that you couldn't really re-engineer anything there. But right now, Tony Valdez, according to this, and again, Tony, come in and correct me, it says that you're having to truck in water. Owner Tony Valdez is being forced to truck in replacement drinking water from Rock Springs to keep the facility open. This process costs roughly $1,200 for every 8,000 gallons, a massive financial drain that only lasts the facility about 2 weeks, so $600 a week in a water bill. The water fell so rapidly, averaging over a foot a day in the early drawdown, that the physical stress broke the structures on all three of the marina's main piers and bulk of the boat ramps. And I've seen pictures of that, guys. And so everyone is suffering, but my point is that even if the Bureau requests more output from Flaming Gorge, they just don't have it to give. Now, at Flaming Gorge, they're doing everything they can to stop the bleed, but if you look at the averages for the last 14 days, and by the way, Flaming Gorge is down 1.8 feet over the 2 weeks, so it's losing just over a half a foot per week. But when they first ordered the release, remember, it was a foot a week, so it's cut in half now. But the average inflow over the last 14 days is 587 cubic feet per second, while the average outflow, guys, is almost 4 times that at 19,052. And you can see this is held pretty steady, the outflow downstream to Powell. But it's been great fluctuations between the inflow and cubic feet per second. Again, you are at 4 times the output than you are of your input. And I'm not sure if that rain got into Flaming Gorge. I know it had some effect on, I think, a little bit of Powell and on Lake Mead. But guys, Powell in itself is in trouble. Remember, the Colorado Sun 3 weeks or so ago reported cavitation problems, and that changed the level or the danger level at Powell by quite a bit. And when they put that report out and the Bureau of Reclamation realized what was going on with the cavitation effects at Lake Powell, guys, they changed the numbers. What we were going to see that was that at 3,049 feet, they were going to start to have physical limit problems. But now with the cavitation, guys, that has changed by 20 feet, 3490 to 3510. See this? So at 3510, we will see legal trigger points now. And it's so critical, guys, that at 3, 5, 10, again, we're not far away from that, up 13 something feet, but it has, again, been designated as the legal trigger point, and it will forcefully cut off water delivery rules. If the lake hits 3510, which it's headed there, the federal government officially places Lake Powell on a run-of-the-river operational status. Now, all the legal formulas up to that point will be kicked out, guys, because under the run-of-the-river rules, Glen Canyon Dam is legally restricted from releasing any more water down to Lake Mead than what physically flows into it from upstream, minus evaporation. That's run-of-the-river. We've talked about that's how the Colorado is going to end up, and it's getting there sooner than later. The Bureau can no longer borrow water from Powell to bail out Lake Mead at that point. And again, Flaming Gorge is putting about all it can, because Powell's current inflow is a meager 4,860 feet or cubic feet per second, while its outflow is 7,800 cubic feet per second. Dropping to 3, 5, 10 means that the downstream faucet will immediately snap shut by roughly 40%, instantly choking Lake Mead's primary water source. Now, Powell's currently listed at 3,523 feet, and that's about 13 foot from hitting the 3,510 foot operational cliff. That's where it goes to run of the river. And we got to remember, we had a pre-rain buffer, but before that, Powell was burning out 1.15 feet per week. So we're 13 foot away. What does that say? That in roughly 11 to 12 weeks in mid-October, you're going to go to run of the river from Mead, from Powell, which will quickly force the same situation at Lake Mead. And so now the Bureau of Reclamation, guys, is recognizing what we're seeing, recognizing the almost exact timeline. They're confirming that by autumn, the physical cavitation damage and the 3510-foot legal trigger will force a total shutdown of traditional Colorado River management. By mid-October, guys, game up as far as the way they handle it. Then it's basically, I think, all the way from Fontanelle to Flaming Gorge to Powell to Mead and below will become run of the river. And you're going to see these giant monoliths standing in the way, and them trying to use outlets to let the river run naturally. Some of those outlets aren't designed to handle that because of cavitation. And going back to Hoover Dam for a moment, they're saying that its hourly generation status reveals that the loss of hydraulic head pressure is already crippling the plant's maximum capacity in real time. Operating at this elevation of 1041.27, the dam is experiencing a massive baseline power penalty long before the physical cavitation cutoff even arrives. Again, at every foot of water, you lose overhead pressure. And guys, 2 days ago, we had a pass by the Copernicus satellite over Temple Bar at Lake Mead. And guys, this thing is really looking trapped. Again, you can see from the live webcam, look it up on YouTube, Temple Bar and Marina Live Webcam, I think it's what it's called. And the webcam, guys, looks out, and well, it can change, but a lot of time it's looking out over this bow. And this is the tires that are the windbreak barrier and wave break barrier that are now sitting on the ground. And you still have a foot or so of water there, but instead of floating, they are now sitting there and causing silt to build up even worse. And this tiny outlet right here is the only way in and out. But again, think about this, guys. Going back, we've looked at the different pictures and all, but there's just no room to move the marina. Those days are over with and past, and they realize it. I don't know exactly what's going to happen here. I think a lot of people really haven't decided on their final plans. It's hard to say, and it would definitely be a hard choice for anyone because of all the years and effort and work and money that's been put into these marinas. Is now you're looking at it basically a dried up mud hole almost. The water is very shallow. You can tell it from the webcams. But guys, this is very different from the way it started out. So this one and Colville are both trapped. So these marinas cannot move. They cannot get the big rental boats out. The insurers have stopped the ability for them to even leave the dock because of running aground. And I don't doubt that some of these are very close to doing that, setting at the pier, because you can see from the webcam the water is not that deep. And this is just a still shot from that camera at Temple Bar. It's not long ago, maybe less than 30 minutes ago or so ago. But here's the tire line, that bow that we just looked at from 300 miles up. And over here is the small outlet now that the boats like this can barely make it through. The big ones, they can't. I've seen them have to turn around from the other side. But again, here's the tire barrier that looks like a bow from that altitude. And they are setting on the ground, building up a silt wall, especially on the outside layer. And you can tell by the reflection, guys, if you've been on the water for any amount of time, it's getting very shallow there. And it's a shame because it's just like with Tony Valdez and them. We got the group here that have put everything, their entire life, blood, sweat, and tears into Temple Bar. And they're having to deal with this. But the things are changing. It's not just going to affect Temple Bar or Flaming Gorge and the Buckboard Marina. We're looking at the poles becoming too hot. We're looking at the ice flows melting. Of course, we're not seeing a lot of rain in the desert Southwest. We've been through that before, looking at the different high pressure zones that are there. All we can do, and all you guys in the desert Southwest can do, is hope for a little more rain. That's each time that happens, it slows down the dates that we're talking about getting to these levels. And they do need slowing down. But guys, right now, when you're looking at 3 weeks for some events and maybe 6 weeks on the other ones, it's time to make decisions on what you're going to do. Again, hope and pray for a little more rain, slow it down, and it gives you more time to make your decisions. But remember, our Father loves you. We love you. And this is a major heads up, guys. Be safe. Prepare. Failure to prepare is preparing to fail, right? And we're down to that point. Again, heads up. Be safe.